This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome to another episode of the Less is More Sports Podcast, the social media and sports podcast. And Matt, I was thinking, it's been 3 years and we want to show some kind of appreciation to our fans. So, I think they need a nickname. I mean, every other podcast has them. So, we should just shout out the Less is More Sports listeners with their own nickname. So I think after the show, what I'm thinking about doing is I'm going to make a comment section, make a comment thread, and we're going to give the Less is More Sports fans their own nickname. And if they don't cooperate, I think you have to pick the nickname.
Why do I have to pick the nickname?
Because I think it would be just great. I think whatever you come up with would be great.
All right. Well, maybe they'll be the lessers. I don't know.
I already don't like it. Never mind. You have been revoked. Your privileges have been revoked.
I was put on the spot and I had to make a joke, damn it. So you know what?
You swung and you missed. But anyways,
it happens.
As always, we are the social media and sports podcast, and this episode is going to be all about football. We're going to talk about the playoffs in football and what social media is saying about them. And we are going to kick it off in college. And Matt, I thought we were safe. Because after two very good semifinal matchups, the title game happened. And Matt, boat racing doesn't even do it justice what the hell Georgia did to TCU. But of course, after the first half, when Georgia was leading TCU 31-7 or whatever it was, I get on Twitter, and at first I see it from Louis Riddick. Then I see it from RG3. And then the dreaded question that I'm going to ask you now, Matt.
Oh, God.
Were these the best four teams in the college football playoff?
You know what the best part about this question is, Les?
What?
Next year, it's going to be totally irrelevant. That's going to be the best part of all this. Is because, next year...
Is the 12 team next year?
I don't know, but man, it's just good to know that this stupid question is going to be completely irrelevant within 2 or 3 years because we're going to have 12 teams. But you know what? I was going to say it. Probably not. This is not to diss TCU in any way, shape, or form. They had a great season. They're a great story. We discussed the dog in them. They beat Michigan, which I don't think many people expected them to do. But I'm just going to be honest. On any given Saturday, I can't say Sunday, I do think Alabama or healthy Tennessee probably would have beat them, 6 times out of 10, to be honest. It's not as big of a gap as people think. But, I really don't know. But when you're given the strict criteria they have, we've just basically decided in this era of college sports that the key to being good is just not losing. That's the weird thing. We reward not losing, and we should. But there comes a point where, you question whether or not you actually are getting the best teams because, the good teams are playing one another, especially in conferences like the SEC and the Big Ten. So, I'm not sure. Now, did TCU have every right to be in that championship game? Yes, they did. Did the playoff committee make the right decision? They were left with no other choice. If USC wins, maybe we're talking about something different. If they beat Utah the second time, we're talking about something different. They didn't. TCU dropped one spot because they only had one loss. I really can't say. All I know is that it's a great story. They are a good team, and they just ran into a buzzsaw of, and that's the thing that should be scariest of all to anybody who watches college football is that Georgia was supposed to be depleted this year. They lost how many? They lost 15 guys. And instead of being depleted, they got reloaded. And now those guys who already have one championship under their belt are going to be back next year for another one. And there are a bunch of first round picks on that team. There are 2 or 3 maybe on TCU. And that's just what happens. Especially in the system where I think actually what happened is the gap actually helped TCU a great deal when they played Michigan. Because with Michigan, you can game plan. You know who their good players are. You know where they're injured at. You don't really expect anybody to come out of nowhere. Whereas with Georgia, it's just oh, hey, we covered Brock Bowers. Oh, now they're going to the receiver. okay, we're managing to block the defensive line. Kaylee Ringo is now like free to like pick off any ball you throw. And I think that's probably more of what killed TCU than them not being a worthy team. But would we have loved to have seen Alabama and Georgia play at one point this year? I know I would have. Are they did they get the four best teams in college football to start the playoff by the criteria? Yeah, they did. But it's pretty weird criteria. But did we see the best four teams in the country? I'm going to say no.
As much as you and I have talked about movies on this podcast, look, I'm not Ant-Man, you're not Wasp, and we're not jumping back and forth from the freaking quantum realm because we can't look in hindsight and see what Alabama did to Kansas State, who Kansas State, as we remember, beat TCU in the Big 12 championship game, and then assume that the best four teams were not in the college football playoff. At the time that the four teams had to be selected, these were the four best teams with the best resume. Because in no way, shape, or form are we going to put a two-loss Alabama team over an undefeated Michigan team. Because if we're going to talk about TCU, taking out TCU, we got to talk about the team that they beat. Because then it's only fair if we're going to be hindsight warriors, right? Because hindsight warriors are funny. Because it's easy to say things in the moment or after it happens, but we don't have the luxury of doing that. We have to go by the teams with the best resume. So whether we feel like these were the best teams or not, these were the teams that were the most deserving to be in those four positions. So I absolutely hate this question because we can do this every year and we'll do it. We can. And in the 12-team playoff, it's going to happen then too. There's going to be that 13 seed on the outside looking in. There's always going to be that outsider looking in. And then be like, oh, were these the 12 best teams? Yes. Like at the time a decision had to be made, these were the best teams with the best resume. So I am absolutely sick of this question, but it makes for a great podcast though. It makes for a great podcast topic.
Keep bashing Michigan so that way when Jim Harbaugh becomes coach, we'll get a shout out from him when he becomes the Colts head coach.
I've heard that rumor, and that might be a rumor we might be talking about later, potentially. I mean, at this point, anybody could be the Colts head coach. They've interviewed enough people.
I'm telling you, I can't wait for tomorrow, man. I'm going up there, going to sit with Chris Ballard, going to lay all of my chips on the table, and bam, I'm getting hired.
Hashtag hire Matt.
Hashtag hire Matt.
But anyways, the next question I got, and this is another question I feel like we get every time a team goes undefeated. And I saw this tweet from Jonathan Stewart, the former Panthers running back first. And then it took off. So, Matt, is this Georgia team the best ever?
Well, I thought hindsight was 2020. So are we going to be able to compare them? Never mind. I'm having fun here. No, but it's all personal choice, man. If you love a team, that team means the world to you, then that's the best team of all time. You're not going to convince me otherwise. You're not going to convince a Georgia fan otherwise. And you're not going to convince an LSU fan that 2019 LSU wasn't the best team of all time. You're not going to convince 2006, 2001 Miami Hurricane team fan that their team wasn't the best of all time, even if they didn't win the ship. You're not going to convince.
Well, that team did win the championship, though.
Oh, that team was when it won. Sorry.
Yeah, it was the next year where they lost on a controversial call to Ohio State.
I miss Jim Tressel's sweater vest.
It was a nice sweater vest.
It was a great sweater vest. That's not the point. The point is, we can debate this question forever and ever and ever, and we can play it on the new college football NCAA 25, but there's no definitive answer. There's just fan opinion. And, in my opinion, I thought the LSU 2019 run was a little bit more magical because of like the guys who made up that team and the offense that came with it. But I'm not going to sit here and knock that a really good defense. I'm not going to make fun of Stetson Bennett like some people on this podcast do constantly. I'm not going to make fun of anybody who thinks George is the greatest.
Are you talking about me or are you talking about Bean? Because I don't make fun of Stetson Bennett on this podcast.
Well, I was talking about Bean. I see that look in his eyes when we talk. He's doing it right now. He's squinting like, oh, he said the name. I hate that guy. He's going to be selling insurance in a week anyway. What do I care? That's what Bean's thinking right now. He's the greatest hater of Stetson Bennett. But I'm not going to take that away from any Georgia fan, or even going to argue with them that they may be one of the great teams of all time, if not the, because you do a repeat. You become the first team to repeat in the playoff era. This team, I think, yeah, they might have been the defense, maybe not as much, but still one of the best teams of all time. It's all a fan subjective thing. So, you know how much I love like debates about goats when people compare Jordan and LeBron. I mean, so I'm going to have the same answer here, which is we just can't compare because it's never going to happen. It's never
Yeah.
going to happen. There are some people who probably would say that the Yale Bulldogs in 1901 were the greatest college football team of all time. And you know what? They played in leather helmets and said cheerio when they scored a touchdown. So,
Cheerio.
you know, we can debate this all day, but if you're a fan of that team and that team's the best in your mind, roll with it. You got the chip, you got 2 in a row. Just smile and have fun on the trip.
I thought it was crazy at first, honestly. But then I looked up the numbers and, obviously they went undefeated.
Yeah.
They scored 41 points a game. They held their opponents to 14 points a game. And they won the national championship by 58 points. That is a good foundation for who's the best team ever. That's a good foundation. You could argue it. But as you all know, I am a firm believer that the 2019 LSU Tigers, or according to Sports Reference, the Fighting Tigers, are the best team ever. And ironically enough, Twitter was having fun with this one because when this debate started happening, Vegas actually got in the fun and said if they were playing, they tweeted out if Georgia and LSU were going to play, that LSU would be a 6.5 point favorite. I'm gonna have to take the over on that on LSU. I think they beat them by more than that because what it separates it for me is a couple things. One, they played a much tougher schedule.
That is
LSU
true.
played 5 top 10 teams that year. They ended the season playing 3 consecutive top 5 teams, and they beat them all by 17 plus. There was no 1 point kicker missed. Kicker misses a field goal. That's how you win the game, like they did against Ohio State. They were all convincing wins. And of course, the lowest margin of victory came against a very good Clemson team who had my son, who we'll talk about here in a little bit, and the number 2 defense in all of it was either number 2 or number 1 defense in all of college football, and they beat them by 17 points in the national championship game. And that was their lowest margin of victory within the last 3 weeks of the season. What you think about that? Another thing is, as we mentioned before the college football playoff started, is that Georgia had the 52nd ranked pass defense, and that could be an area that Ohio State could take advantage of. And they did. Now, if nothing against CJ Stroud, Marvin Harrison Jr. is a stud, Egbuka is a stud, but come on. If they have that kind of success against Georgia, what do you think Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and of course my man, Mr. Joe Shiesty, Joe Burr himself, is going to do to that defense? Matt's laughing because he knows.
He said the thing.
he said the Burr. Exactly.
He said the thing. Yeah. And not to mention, even like the lesser players, lesser in quotation marks here, like Edwards-Helaire, Thaddeus Moss, you'd have to watch out for them too, even if you did find a way to cover all those guys that you just mentioned. So, it's like I said, that offense was just so much fun that, I have fond memories of it, even being a non-LSU fan. But we'll never know because, alas, it will never happen.
And even that defense was better than people gave it credit for. I mean, that was a defense that still had Derek Stingley and Patrick Queen, who have been gone on to be very good pro players.
Yeah.
So anyways, I think that wraps up what social media was saying about the college football playoff. So now we are going to get into the NFL playoffs, which I'm going to be completely honest, Matt. I just picked a few things that I've been seeing on social media, and I just want you to answer as honestly as you can.
What matters is that it's cap time.
It's cap or no cap time. Exactly.
Cap.
That is the patented part of our show. It's cap or no cap. So anyways, we're going to take it to the first game we're going to talk about is the Jags and Chargers, in which we saw the 3rd largest come from behind victory in NFL postseason history. And Of course, there is plenty blame to go around. But Matt, the number one question I have for you, based on what I'm seeing from social media, is how much do you put the Chargers' loss on head coach Brandon Staley?
You see my cap? It's a fedora because Vince Lombardi. And you know what the cap is doing, Les? It's coming off because he needs to be fired and fired right now. I can't believe he still has a job at this moment. I mean, I don't even think it was necessarily decisions in the Jacksonville game alone that make Brandon Staley a fireable coach right now. If you're going to run your guys out there against Denver in a completely bonkers, meaningless game and get Mike Williams knocked out, get one of your major linebackers hurt, and then go on the road. And, I've seen this point thrown around a lot, and that's totally correct. Why would you do that? Why? I understand you don't want to have your guys rusty, but, the Colts would just put Peyton Manning in for a drive. They'd score a touchdown. And you know what? Oh, thanks, Peyton. Great season. You're out for the game. We're going to go play San Diego and lose in a heartbreaking fashion. But you can do that, Brandon Staley. You can do that. And he didn't. And you're telling me that Mike Williams wouldn't have been a huge boon to have in that game, especially when you're up 27-0 and Lawrence has thrown 4 interceptions and you're right in the heart of Jaguars territory and you're trying to force it to Keenan Allen and a tight end you signed off the scrap heap from the Rams? Yeah, I think that would have been a big factor, is if you could throw it to Mike Williams on the other side of the field or force the Jaguars to cover Mike Williams. So that's just offense number one. And I mean, then there was just the surprisingly what's the word I'm looking for? Unaggressive play calling. Staley's been aggressive all year, and then he just decides out of nowhere, like, oh, we're gonna have Dicker kick a bunch of field goals in Jacksonville territory while we got him down. And he had no Dicker the kicker, hook 'em horns. But the minute he missed that field goal, I think we all knew, Les. We all knew the minute he missed that field goal that would have put them up 33-20, that it was over. It was over because Jacksonville had all the momentum. They had just taken one of the big swings and misses that you can't do in football in that situation. And boom, Trevor Lawrence, the legend of Trevor Lawrence is born again.
My son.
I thought the question about the Chargers was going to be a social media quarterback type thing, which I still don't fully understand. But, what drives me crazy is like the Chargers, they just chargered. And you thought a head coach that we were told was a great analytical defensive mind that wouldn't let the Charger. And you wasted a great season from how many guys on Jacksonville? You injured so many guys in a meaningless game with Denver. You were aggressive all year in horrible situations. And when you needed to be aggressive, you weren't. And after last year's debacle, I just don't see how you can keep that guy as a head coach when Sean Payton is floating out there right at the door waiting to become your next head coach.
That's who I think who is going to be the next head coach of the Chargers. That is. I do think Brandon Staley does get fired, and I think Sean Payton is who ends up becoming the next head coach of the Chargers. So, Matt, you aren't all the way wrong, because the social media quarterback was not the question I asked. But it is part of my answer because, yes, Brandon Staley deserves a lot of blame for this, and he should be fired. Sean Payton should be the next head coach. You heard it here first. But, who's one of the top people that we criticize when we think of the 28-3 blown lead in the Super Bowl? Matt Ryan. Yeah. Who's one of the big names that comes up when we talk about the Colts' 33-0 blown lead? Matt Ryan. We have a tendency as NFL fans to put a lot of blame on the quarterback anytime they blow a lead. But for some reason, we're not doing that with Justin Herbert, and I don't understand why. If you look at his stats, they're not horrible, no. But if you actually go back and watch the second half, he didn't make enough plays to move the ball. Their offense only scored 3 points in the second half, and they didn't do enough to keep the separation there. And that is a lot on him. I'm hearing a lot of people say, why didn't you just run the ball with Eckler? Kill a bunch of time. Yes, that could have been smart, but at the same time, Brandon Staley is putting his franchise player in a position to bring them home, and he did not do enough. So more criticism needs to go on Justin Herbert, and people need to realize that, yes, he is a social media quarterback. The stats are nice. The highlight big throws are nice, but he has done nothing, absolutely nothing, to be put in the category of the players that he is put in. Not the Josh Allens, not the Patrick Mahomes, not the Joe Shiesty, Joe Burr himself. None of
You
that.
did it on purpose.
Do what?
You did that on purpose.
Of course I had to. I love doing Joe Burr.
Les, you did say something interesting though, which is why not the blame. And I got two quick things with that. Number one, I think part of the reason is because he didn't choose to be a social media quarterback. I researched it a little bit, and it's like he didn't walk up like claiming this is like some kind of title of joy. It's something that some guy on Fox Sports invented, who like I guess to be on Fox Sports you have to have like cartoonish levels of being a hater. Because I did see this dude with a jersey that said social media quarterback, and I'm like, dude, if he
Oh,
didn't
it was
ask for it,
Emmanuel Acho. Yeah, we talked about it on the podcast. It was Emmanuel Acho. No, Justin Herbert did nothing to
yeah, that's
earn the
what I'm
title. No, no.
saying.
No, why he got the title is where fans are prematurely putting him.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. It's
but I
no,
think that's
Justin,
why he's not.
I am not hating on anything personally that Justin Herbert
Okay.
did. No, no,
But
no.
I think that's also why that he's not getting the blame. He didn't bring this on himself, you know. He didn't
Mhm.
go up there like Joe Burrow. Now, if he would have said what Joe Burrow did, that the window is open as long as I'm here, and then gone out there and had that performance, we'd be ripping him like crazy
Oh,
for that.
fair. But okay,
So that's what I'm saying.
to
I
touch
don't
on
think
that
I
point,
think part of the reason is he didn't bring it on himself. Is why
but
we're kind of like, eh.
where did Matt Ryan bring that on himself though? Unless Matt Ryan said something that I don't remember.
I think Matt Ryan's problem is that like we're trying to Kyle Shanahan's such a good coach now in San Francisco. We're trying to ignore the fact that it was probably his fault more than Matt Ryan's.
Fair enough. But hey,
I think,
Kyle
I
Shanahan
think
has a blown lead in the Super Bowl with San Francisco too.
that's
But
true. That's
we don't
true.
look at it as much because of who he blew the lead to.
Yes, if you blow it to Tom, if you blew it to him, we'll allow it. If you
Right.
blow it to Mahomes, we'll allow it. And I
Right.
think the other thing is too that's just his first playoff game, so we haven't had enough time to structure a narrative like we want to because Peyton Manning wasn't very good when he started out, and then look what
Yeah.
happened to him. So I think the two reasons we don't criticize him as harshly is because small sample size, and he doesn't really bring it on himself.
So before we get talking about one postseason choke artist to another, I am going to say, though, that the legend, like you said, the legend of Trevor Lawrence, the legend of my son has been bored because as I put on social media, he looked like Jennifer Lawrence in the first half. Then he looked like Trevor Lawrence finally arrived in the second half. But the best part about this is how does he celebrate all this? He goes
Going
to
to
Waffle
Waffle
House.
House.
He goes to Waffle House.
That's
And then
fucking
somebody
awesome.
else tweeted out, you see Trevor Lawrence on Sunday and you see a fight in the parking lot on Monday. You got to love Waffle House.
That is Waffle House in a nutshell.
It is. So next game we're going to talk about is the Bengals and Ravens, in which we saw a go-ahead touchdown in one of the most wild fashions I've ever seen in my life.
Oh my God.
Tyler Huntley, quarterback, sneaks it, fumbles it, and then Sam Moneyman Hubbard takes it 98 yards for the go-ahead touchdown. But that's not what. That's not what we're going to talk about there. That's not what we're going to talk about there. We're going to talk about, of course, the quote that's flying around social media that was made by running back J.K. Dobbins. And that question is, do the Ravens beat the Bengals with Lamar Jackson?
You know what? Yeah, it is Cap. It's Cap. Tyler Huntley had just as good of a game, I think. And this is not a diss on Lamar Jackson. This is not to disparage Lamar Jackson. But Tyler Huntley had about as good of a game as I can remember Lamar Jackson having in the playoffs. He had a bad interception. He ran a lot. He had some good throws. It was exactly what you would expect if Lamar Jackson was playing. What I think Dobbins meant from a standpoint, given the context, was I think he meant that Lamar Jackson had one thing that Tyler Huntley may not have as much, and that's the ability, because he's a starting quarterback who's won an MVP, to change the play. and to say like, I don't want to do this, John Harbaugh. I'm going to do this, Jim Harbaugh. I'm going to do this instead. And I think that's the big difference here because statistically, you could have told me that was Lamar Jackson's stat line from last night. The final score would have been the exact same. And I just would have thought, Lamar played okay, like normal. We're going to have that narrative again. But I think in that situation, the one, especially on the like absolutely insane, like volleyball block fumble thick six, is that, Lamar Jackson may have the ability to look at the sideline and say, I ain't effing doing that. I'm going to hand it off to the dude who's been carving up the Bengals all night. And maybe he does do that. So I don't know for certain if Lamar Jackson makes that big of an impact of that on that game, other than in that very unique situation. When he did play, the Ravens did beat the Bengals, but that Bengals team feels like it was 10 years ago and not 3 months ago, given the way they've been playing.
Right.
So as much as I like Lamar Jackson, as much as I think his leadership could have made a difference down at the goal line, as much as I think that's what Dobbins' comments were supposed to reflect, I don't think he would have. I don't think he would have resulted in a different result for that game. It just would have maybe changed the way Cincinnati played defense. Maybe Cincinnati wasn't as focused because Lamar wasn't there. They expected more of an easy ride. Because I was told all week that Tyler Huntley couldn't keep it close, and he did. But the bottom line is the Bengals, I think, are just as good as are just as good as the Chiefs and Bills right now. And I don't think Lamar Jackson would have stopped that.
I don't like to speculate. So I like to go off what I know. And what I know is that Matt's first statement was 100% right. Because what was Tyler Huntley's stat line last night? Matt, he had 2 touchdowns, 2 turnovers, and a 92 passer rating. What was Lamar's stat line in his best, not his average, his best playoff performance? 2 touchdowns, 2 turnovers, and a 78 passer rating. Huntley played better than anything we've seen from Lamar in the postseason. Could this change in the future? Sure. But based on what we know, what we've seen now, Huntley has outplayed Lamar because Lamar overall in the postseason as an average is a 66 passer rating with 3 passing touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown, so 4 total touchdowns and 7 turnovers.
Yeah.
So I don't like to speculate. I like to go off what I know. And what I know is that Huntley gave a better performance than what we've seen from Lamar. So no, I agree with Matt. That is cap. The next question I have about this game, and we're sticking with Mr. Lamar Jackson. Is Lamar coming back next year to Baltimore?
Now, I may need some help with this one because I'm going to say it's cap and he's moving on.
Oh, yeah.
There's something I did see a few guys talking about this today, and I did not know this until they said it on their broadcast. But I didn't realize that Lamar Jackson wasn't even at the game.
Yeah.
Which is incredibly strange, because Lamar Jackson has always seemed like a very team first, encouraging my guys type dude. And the fact he's not there suggests something is a little bit crazier than what we're being led on with. In fact, I said this to my dad this morning. This reminds me a lot, eerily so, of the Kawhi Leonard situation in San Antonio. There's an injury. It's severe. We don't know how severe it is. The player is being hush-hush, not shit-talking the franchise or his coach. Coach is kind of being like wishy-washy with the way things are going. The family of the player is involved. It seems like something is a little bit off here. It's eerily similar to the Kawhi Leonard situation. And going into this off season, you have so many teams who are just a quarterback away from being something really special. You don't even have to sign Lamar Jackson to a long-term deal. If you're the Jets, you just sign him for like 4 years, give him a crap ton of money, and you're better off with him than you are with some guys. Dolphins, you want to move on from Tua regardless of what you say. The Lions, you don't have to sign Lamar Jackson for the next 10 years. You can just sign him for 4 years, have him be a part of something really special, see if his skill set, see and watch as his skill sets develop and he plays with a really good roster around him, similar to Baltimore, and just do it. But there's just something off about this situation, Les. It's very Kawhi Leonard-esque And we all know what happened with Kawhi Leonard. He got his way. He left and he won a championship. And there are teams out there in the NFL now. It's been proven to be a model. If you want to win a Super Bowl, you got to swing for the fences. So I'm going to say that's cap that he comes back. I think that I think if you're the Ravens, you trade him, you try to get as close of a good of a pick as you can, and just feel it out from there. But I'm going to say cap. The situation is just way too weird for me to say he's going to be back.
That's a very interesting comparison, comparing it to the Kawhi Leonard situation. I see a lot of similarities there. One big difference, though, is that Kawhi Leonard had a championship before he did this, before he made that move. So that's one thing that Kawhi had in his bag that Lamar doesn't, is that championship pedigree. Another thing, but the one thing I thought it was cap all season long that Lamar wanted out. I thought it was one of those another overhyped, players unhappy stories where we would eventually just see kind of like what we've been seeing with Aaron Rodgers the last several years, and only to what do I say? He only for him to re-sign with Green Bay in the last couple years. But
Yes.
then I saw, because we are a social media and sports podcast, I saw his IG story. That quote was very cryptic, and it makes me believe that he doesn't feel that the Ravens appreciate him. So
Yeah.
It tells me he wants to go somewhere where he is appreciated. So I agree with you. I don't think he's back in Baltimore. But because we have 7.5 minutes to go before our time slot is up, we're going to round out these last couple questions based on our first weekend in the super wild card weekend of the NFL playoffs. Got to love that new name. Super. So so real quick, is Brock Purdy's playoff debut the best in NFL history? Because I've been seeing that.
That's cap. I
Yeah.
like Brock Purdy. He had a great second half. There are better debuts out there, I'm sure. I can't think of any off the top of my head right now, but let's not overblow a guy who's in a great position to win because he has a lot of skills around him. He had a really mediocre first half that was complemented by a really good second half. That's cap.
I'm going to have to 100% agree. I don't even think he had the best performance of the weekend. I don't even think he had the best debut of the weekend. I think that was Trevor Lawrence, because Trevor Lawrence, what he had to overcome to get that win, he had to come from behind. He had to come from, like I said, playing like Jennifer Lawrence to playing like Trevor Lawrence in the second half. So Brock Purdy looked like a guy, and I take nothing away from this. There's nothing wrong with this. He looked like a guy who was playing within the system, hitting guys that were there, and they made plays. There's nothing wrong with that.
You can win
There's
a Super
nothing
Bowl
wrong
that
with
way.
that. No, you can win that way. And you know what? And Brock Purdy's been successful doing it. So nothing wrong with that. Next question. How much respect has Daniel Jones gained?
Well, that's not really a cap or no cap question, but I think the answer is a lot. I mean, that was his best statistical game of his career, I think, yesterday. And he had it in the biggest moment. And I think a lot of that is on Brian Dable. Brian Dable can take guys who kind of are big and physical and turn them into really good players. And I think that was a key example. And I don't want to detract from Saquon Barkley, who had an absolutely amazing game. He literally was dragging men into the end zone to give the Giants the lead. But I'm not going to act like Daniel Dimes doesn't get some respect from me after that, because that was a very impressive performance. If Steve Slayton hadn't dropped that, not Steve Slayton, Darius Slayton hadn't dropped that pass, it would have been even better. So I'm just going to say, yeah, he's got a lot of respect from me. The problem is he's going up against Philadelphia now, and it's a little bit more intimidating than that paper tiger in Minnesota.
Absolutely. I agree. He's gained a lot of respect. And, I remember when he was taken with the 6th pick and all the criticism that he got. And now it's just all coming full circle of him finally having that moment where he's proving doubters wrong. For me, a Duke fan, one who's seen Daniel Jones play in person, it's cool to see. So the last one. And of course, they play at the time of this podcast recording, they play tonight, Buccaneers and Cowboys. Biggest game I'm told biggest NFL game I'm told in ESPN history. Bunny ears, bunny ears, bunny ears. Tom Brady sneaks in to the playoffs. What are the chances he gets on one last roll and goes out on top?
Oh, they're greater than I ever want to admit, Les. That's the problem. Dallas, if Dallas, Dallas,
Dallas.
Dallas. I don't know what to think about Dallas. They're on like a weird trajectory right now where they had such a bad game in week 18 that you just think there's no way that Dak Prescott can play that poorly again. And then Tom Brady happens. Tom Brady's got the magic. Tom Brady's got Chris Godwin. Tom Brady's got Mike Evans. Tampa Bay still has a pretty decent defense. So I don't know. It depends on what your idea of a role is because next week Tampa Bay would be playing. Oh crap! I got to think San Francisco, and we saw what happened the last time they played San Francisco. So, do I think they can beat the Cowboys? Hell yeah, I think they definitely can. They can get the Cowboys on an off night with a good defense. Tom Brady is still playoff Tom Brady. He's got some magic in him. But do I think they can beat the 49ers? No, because I saw what happened last time that happened. And it wasn't week 1 like when they played Dallas. It was week 16, 15. Pretty more bigger recent sample size with Brock Purdy. So do I think a roll is possible? No. Do I think a win is possible? Yes.
That's very fair. Horace, I've learned in my however many years of being a sports fan to never count out Tom Brady. Never count out Tom Brady when he has a chip on his shoulder. And let's not forget, Matt, he is coming off a divorce. He might be wanting to silence a lot of critics. So that is worth noting. But it's also worth noting, sorry, Cowboys fans, but you've never beaten Tom Brady, and you're not going to beat him tonight. And now watch. The Cowboys are going to win because I say that.
That's true. And the last Cowboys road playoff win was in like 1983. So,
yeah.
All streaks are made to be broken, I guess, is what we're trying to say. So, pound Dallas to win, maybe cover at least, and we'll see where we go from there. But yeah, Tampa Bay is just such a weird team because I could see them in the championship game, or I could see them getting blown out tonight. It's a really weird playoff field, is all I can say.
It's been, yeah, I can completely agree with that. But that's all the time we have for today. As always, like and subscribe to Less is More Sports YouTube and Spotify channel. Follow the social media pages on Facebook and Twitter. And without further ado, Matt, Bean, and I are out. That concludes the football episode.
The football episode.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to have like some kind of
the American football episode. We don't want to have
the American football. Yeah, because we have had a soccer episode. Shout out to my boy Jacob Teasley.
And we don't want to have a bunch of confused Premier League fans asking where the Chelsea talk is.
Oh yeah, that would be very confusing. But anyways, be sure to also think of a name that you would like me and Matt to address you all as, because I don't think we want to make Matt call you all the lessers from here on out.
The lepers,
the lessers, whatever. That's all the time we got. Finally,
we'll think of something better.
All right, we out.
See ya.